Will the clerk please call the roll?
Mrs. Capolini? Here. Mr. Fry?
Here.
Mr. Hanum?
Here.
Mr. McCann?
Here.
Mr. Richardson?
Here.
Ms. Stowe? Here. Mrs. Westphal?
Here.
6 members of City Council are present in council chambers and 1 member of council is attending via Zoom. So there are 7 members in attendance and a quorum is met. I'd like to welcome our visitors to the meeting this evening. We have a scout here tonight. We appreciate you coming. And if you would, traditionally when we have a scout in the room, we ask him to lead our Pledge of Allegiance to start the meeting. So we're ready to go with that.
To the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
If I may ask, what scout troop are you with? And what school is that associated with?
Schools from Springfield, Northview, all over.
All right. Well, we welcome you here. We're glad you're in attendance. And as I said before the meeting, if you've got a question, put up your hand and I'll recognize you in an appropriate time. Let's move on to agenda item 3, which is additions to the agenda for this evening. I would like to add, with council's permission, on to agenda item 11A. We're going to hear a report of the Building and Grounds Committee. I would like to add on to that a further discussion of including the mini park in downtown as part of the DORA and the issues we are trying to address on the closure of Maplewood. So that will all follow. We can make that 11B if you want, but it follows right along with Lindsay Stow's report of the Building and Grounds Committee held on June 8th. Mrs. Westphal.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to schedule a committee of the whole meeting to talk about the charter amendment regarding election.
We'll make that, let's make it 12A. You're going to schedule a meeting. I don't think it's referred to a committee yet.
I was thinking it would become committee of the whole.
Okay. Charter change, 12A, committee of the whole. Additional items from members of City Council.
Mr. Mayor, I would like to add consideration of a potential safety committee meeting following the report from Chief Schnorr on item 6.
All right. You are not a member of the safety committee. Is that all right with the chairman of the safety committee?
Mr. Mayor, I think I'd like to hear Chief Schnorr's report first, and if we feel that there's further items in question, then we could move forward with that.
I'll make a note of it when we get there and we'll get back to you, Mr. Hank. But we'll consider a safety committee meeting. I think you're going to hear a lot of information from Chief Schnorr this evening of the actions that have been taken. But if more detail is needed, that's appropriate in a safety committee meeting. Other items from other members of City Council? Hearing none. Mr. Sanford.
Nothing, Mr. Mayor.
Chief Schnorr.
Nothing, Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Aller.
Nothing, Mr. Mayor.
Looks like we have Mr. Schroyer via Zoom.
Special K.
Anything, Mr. Schroyer? Your audio is off. Your face is off. I'm not sure you're there. All right.
Nothing, Mr. Mayor.
All right. Thank you. And Mrs. Brining.
Nothing, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. With that, is there a motion to approve the agenda as amended?
So moved.
Second.
It's moved and seconded to approve the agenda as amended. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries and the agenda for this evening's meeting is approved. Moving on to agenda item 4, approval of the regular council meeting minutes from our last meeting on June the 1st. Mrs. Westfall.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Move approval of the Sylvania City Council meeting minutes from the meeting held on June 1st, 2020 as submitted.
Second. It's been moved and seconded for approval of the meeting minutes as submitted from our June 1st, 2020 meeting. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries and those meeting minutes are approved. Agenda item 5 is a COVID-19 update. For the last several meetings, I've had each member of the mayor's staff give you an update. There are no big issues for update, but they are certainly available for your questions. There are a couple items I want to bring to your attention, however. One is that City Hall is open by appointment and the recommended use of a mask through the end of this month. Beginning July 1st, it is our intention to unlock City Hall and make it open to the public. Tax filing date is July 15th, and Mr. Schroyer thought it was important to be back open for that. We might have been open earlier, but the current civil unrest gave me pause, and we've decided to leave it locked until July 1st. But there is no reason for anybody not to be able to get the attention of people inside and come down for a instant appointment or schedule appointment in the future to discuss taxes or zoning or whatever issues they may have. Another issue concerning COVID-19 is the administration's continuing to explore the use of CARES Act funding from the federal government. We're all aware that that's been funded by the U.S. Congress and is in the Ohio legislature, probably to be approved shortly if it hasn't been already. But the wording is difficult for us and many other local communities. And we're trying to clarify through the Ohio Municipal League and through other legislative contacts what the Ohio legislature's intent really is. The federal legislation says that it cannot be used for any budgeted expenses, but can be used for first responders. Well, we're not having substantial first responder overtime. We have in the last couple of weeks had a lot of overtime in response to some protest marches through town, and I'm not sure that would qualify. And we have some other minor expenses, but we can't apply those funds, which are over $500,000, without understanding what the rules really are. And we're getting mixed signals. We're working this from both sides of the aisle, trying to get clarification as to what it will do and what we need to do. The first step would be for City Council to pass an ordinance saying that we meet the qualifications for reimbursement and then determine how much we can apply for. But we hope to be able to apply for the full $500,000 plus. But the rules are a little unclear at the moment. Are there any questions for the administrative staff over COVID-19 issues?
Mr. Mayor, could we hear from Toby generally on current status of our income tax collections?
I discussed that earlier in the day with Mr. Schroyer. He did give you an update 2 weeks ago. And Toby, do you have any further update you can give mid-month?
I do not have an update, further update. When we deal in middle of months, timing becomes an issue and it can be really misleading. It's my preference and my plan to wait for the entire month to be in and then give the update.
To recall from 2 weeks ago, Toby, our payroll tax is holding pretty steady through May. Is that correct?
Correct. Our withholding was only down $20,000 that collected in May for the month of April. And the entire month of April was shut down. we're still up. We're actually up year to date $70,000 in withholding because of the strong first 3 months.
What is throwing the estimate off is the fact that tax filing date has been delayed 3 months until July 15th. And I'm sure that individuals that owe income tax don't want to pay it in advance if they don't have to. So we need to wait for July 15th to come and pass to see where we really stand. Again, I'm sure we're going to be down some, but the CARES Act does not allow us to apply for federal funding to replace lost revenue, only for additional COVID-19 expenses that are not budgeted. And we'll try to find out where that goes. And we hope that all the governments in the state of Ohio will play by the same rules. That's what we're trying to clarify where we're at. And both sides of the aisle are unable to answer that question at the moment.
Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Fry.
I did have another follow-up question for Toby. A couple of months ago, when we first started having the COVID conversations, we talked about the elective surgeries being delayed. And one of the things that he mentioned was we were anticipating, because we have a self-pay healthcare structure, an influx once elective surgeries were permitted, because we delayed those for a period of time. Have we seen that yet? Or are we still seeing some benefit in that regard from a cost perspective?
Mr. Fry, we have not seen an uptick as of now, but those do take some time to get through the system. So there may be, people out there having those surgeries done and they just haven't come through and hit our books yet. But we'll keep an eye on it and watch for it. But we have not seen any significant uptake at this point.
What's our expenses? What are our expenses for that section of our budget down year to date, if at all?
I don't have that number right in front of me, but I certainly can get back with you tomorrow morning and give that to you.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Mr. Schroyer.
Yep. Mr. Mayor, I have another question for Toby.
I believe is that Mr. Doug? Okay, go ahead, Doug.
Yeah. Toby, I see the city of Maumee apparently is taking some actions in anticipation of revenue shortfalls. Have you had any discussions with the Maumee finance people to understand why they don't have the same they don't have the same confidence you do in the revenues that'll come in on the 15th of July?
I have not had discussions with them. Certainly, if you would like me to, I certainly will. But at this point, I have not had discussions with Maumee. No.
I've had only very limited discussions with Maumee council members and a council member in Perrysburg, and they seem to have, and this is anecdotal and it's nothing formal, but they do seem to have some concerns about revenues loss of revenues as a result of this. So I would appreciate it if you would touch base with your fellow suburban finance people and make sure that we're not missing something. I'm not suggesting that we are.
I will tell you, Doug, and I think the mayor could better speak to this, but on the mayor's conference call with similar mayors around the area, every one of them said that their withholdings were surprisingly very strong, even during these last couple months.
That's good.
However, Mayor Carr was not on that call, so I can't represent Maumee. Oregon was on the call, and Toledo was on the call. and some of the smaller communities in Lucas County were on the call. And actually, they all said they were surprised how strong their payroll tax collections are. They all have the same issue we have. Until tax day comes, it looks like we're way down. But we are down some. To be clear, we are down. It's just a matter of how much. Other questions for staff, mayor, staff, or me? Thank you. Let's move on to agenda item 6 then. I've asked the chief to give us an update on his preparations for certification in the Ohio Police Collaborative. That's become an issue in the last few weeks. And last week, Governor DeWine, during one of his press conferences, specifically brought up this subject and the fact that he was encouraging all police departments in the state to meet these standards and that they would be calling each and every one of them to have an understanding why they're not doing it. We've been able to read in the paper, particularly from Sylvania Township, why they don't want to do it. And I think that's true of some other departments. We are not in the minority in Northwest Ohio. We are in the majority that haven't signed up for this. The newspaper articles made that quite clear. But Chief Snore has been working on this. This is one of the items he discussed with me when he interviewed for our chief's position. He has brought this issue to City Council a couple of times recently for changes that we need to do. And I want to have him give an update. But before he does, Chief, I want to publicly thank you for your overtime and organizational skills to de-escalate and to manage the 2 protest marches that have gone through Sylvania in the last couple of weeks. Those are difficult to plan all contingency for, and in some communities have caused trouble. You did not let it get to that level here, despite the baiting that was done at the protest march last Thursday, particularly the comments from the organizer, who I don't know if she was a student or not. She was certainly trained out of town about hands up, don't shoot. And these police are afraid of you. While she was making the comment about how afraid our police were of the students, I have pictures of all of our police officers looking out from their sit-down strike at Main and Monroe, protecting them from being run over by cars. I have to believe if they were really scared of them, they wouldn't be putting their backs to them. So your officers and you are to be commended for responding and being prepared in the proper way. And I very much appreciate that. You and I both lost sleep over that, but it's worked out fine.
Thank you, Mayor. I appreciate that. And these are trying times in our country, and certainly trying times in law enforcement. And, you know, the thing that we always try to remember is that, you know, we are the police, but, you know, we are also the public, and the public is also the police. We work for the citizens of the United States, the citizens of the state of Ohio, citizens of the city of Sylvania. And we always try to center ourselves on that, no matter what adversity we're facing. And we stand in solidarity with many of the protesters on several of the issues. Now, obviously, you know, we don't want to join in the anti-police rhetoric or ideas about abolishing police. Those wouldn't, you know, support a democratic society. But there are times where police officers have made mistakes, and we condemn those. And there's sometimes police officers have made, you know, taken malicious acts, and we condemn those. So I appreciate the acknowledgement. And we worked hard with every entity that wanted to lawfully protest in the city to find common ground where we could let them have their events in a safe way to support what they're saying. At the same time, try to cause little inconvenience or potential for conflict. So I appreciate that. It's interesting that the collaborative topic came up. This is something that I've been interested in, working toward supporting the effort to happen here in Sylvania for about 5 years. It's only been really my decision to pursue this for about a year, a little over a year now since I've been the chief. And as the mayor mentioned, it was in my action plan. I provided a 2-year action plan for things that I needed to be pursued or worked on as the new chief. And the collaborative was certainly one of those. And what the thing that needed to happen to make the collaborative, for those who don't know, the collaborative is basically, it was a governor's initiative, I believe from Governor Kasich, it was from the prior administration. And it was a commitment by police departments to adopt certain policies and procedures and certain operating methods, if you will. And it was voluntary, and some agencies got right on it, and some agencies were a little bit slower too. At the same time, because it's linked to policy and procedure, one of my primary objectives of the first year was to update our policies and procedures. We have over 130 policies and procedures for a variety of things that we do. And none of those are very simple, concise tasks, and they change over time based on the law, based on best practice, those sorts of things. So I came to council in the fourth quarter of 2019 and asked for the funding to get Lexipol. Lexipol is a legal advisory service that helps you create policy or update your policy, and then it helps you maintain policy. And then the other part they do is they provide training. So that's the other important part of policing, is that you're training on the things that you're supposed to do right. So the right way to do your job. So that was just approved in the fourth quarter. We actually bought that around the first of the year. So the first part of getting that policy and procedure update, I requested from Lexipol that we focus on the collaborative policies first, because there are a list of policies that you have to adopt to be part of the collaborative. And those policies include use of force, bias-free policing, hiring, and the new one for this year is pursuits. And those, like pursuit and use of force are very detailed policies. They're founded in Ohio law, they're founded in best practice, they're founded in constitutional law. So you need to be clear and concise. Then we also have to work with the labor union to make sure that they understand that there's no contention. So it's not a quick process. And my goal is in the next several months up to the end of the year. The virus situation didn't help with the process. We were down for a few weeks where we weren't working with them. But my goal is to have a fully updated best practice, legally defensible policy and procedure manual by the end of the year. But as far as the collaborative, we filed our formal application back on May 22nd, and we had just completed the policies required to be part of the collaborative with Lexipol. Lexipol serves over 400 agencies in the state of Ohio, so they have the collaborative requiremts built into their policy and procedure and their tags. So the policy, it's not an actual book. Our policy and procedure manual is not an actual book. It's a web-based app, and so when an officer's pulling it up, there are tags or links to the Ohio Revised Code, to the collaborative. So when they're reading the policy, they can also reference those materials and see not only why we have that policy, but why it's important in the state of Ohio, or important to the collaborative, or why it's based in law. So the status is we're formally applied. Captain Hubaker is our implementation specialist with this assignment. He is already has a username and password. We're in the system, and we just talked to our customer service rep, if you will, with the collaborative last week, and they indicated now that we have those policies and we're moving forward, we should be certified in a couple of weeks. I mean, I don't want to have an exact target date, but we are actively working with collaborative, and we have we already had many of the building blocks, in our current manual. Our current manual is in a 3-ring binder. It's a little bit dated, and that was one of my initiatives, was to get up to best. When I've been here since I was 22 years old. The city of Sylvania and the police department have always been extremely progressive, extremely focused on customer service, and those are the things that I value. I value doing a good job for residents, protecting people's rights, and I think there for a while with training and other things, we just, get behind on the technology. And if you don't stay up on the technology, it changes so fast these days. You really have to have some system like this, or you'd have to have a staffer that keeps up time. We don't have those types of resources. So that's kind of where we are. I would have liked to have some of it done a little bit earlier. I think maybe it would have been done in April had we not had the COVID-19. I don't want to make excuses, but it has been an unusual year. So, along with this, the related topics, two things I want to talk about. Body cams. We came to the, that was in the proposal for this year's budget, was approved. Again, the virus situations kind of slowed that down. We have a committee of officers that this is a 10-year purchase. Our current in-car camera system is at the end of the life. We've had it for 10 years. We know that we're going to have this body camera and in-car camera system for quite some time, for probably at least 10 years. That's the goal. And we wanted to make sure we had a system that was that would meet our needs and that the technology wouldn't be outdated right after we bought it. So we've done a lot of research. We've picked the product and hope to come council by the council meeting in July to bring a proposal to make that purchase and move forward with implementing the body cameras along with the in-car camera system, which will replace the system we already have. Now, just to give you an update about the types of cameras we have right now, we do have in-car digital camera systems in all of our motor patrol cars. We also have cameras, the same exact system in our detective interview rooms. Everything's archived and everything's there's a retention schedule and it's very, very well in place. We don't have any issues with that. And in addition to that, something that we did invest in that would probably delay the need for body cameras is we have taser cams as well. So every one of our tasers has a camera on it. So when the taser's turned on, it's recording as well. So we did have 2 layers of cameras right now, but since we're upgrading our technology, this is just a good opportunity. The actual cameras themselves aren't that expensive. It's the entire system that's the big cost. So since we're buying an entire system, this is a good time for us to pursue the body cameras. So, and with the collaborative, if you have body cameras, you have to have the body camera policy that matches the collaborative. So that's part of the process. They don't require cameras, but if you have cameras, you need to follow best practices, and we will be doing that.
That was an issue for a while, Chief, that delayed the body cameras in Sylvania. Mrs. Brining might help to answer this. There are questions about public access to those tapes and privacy issues, and I think those have been resolved by state law.
Correct. Yes, the statutes regarding those have been resolved. There was a lot of questions about redaction, about if an officer goes into someone's home and there's juveniles or medical information laying out, we would have had to basically hire someone to go through and redact those in order to make them accessible. And then also the storage for the files, the retention time that was required was initially pretty cumbersome. And I think, and that was adding a lot to the cost, but I think that's been resolved as well.
And you agree, Chief, that issue can be built into your policies for the body cameras now?
Oh, absolutely. We currently have existing policy for the in-car camera use, the systems we use now, and it really won't be a whole lot different. If you make an official citizen contact recording the entire time, the technology has advanced quite a bit since we bought this system. The actual body cameras the officer will wear will be on all the time, but they won't be recording. So if I was wearing a body camera and something happened and I turned my camera on, or certain things that can trigger the camera, another camera coming on in the area, the in-car camera in the car coming on, there's a variety of things that can activate a camera. But if my camera came on, it would actually roll back a period of time. We'll have to determine how long we want that to roll back. But it will roll back and capture the things that happen right before you turn the camera on. So there's a buffering there.
Some of the complaints that you hear in the media are body cameras not being turned on when they should have been turned on, and also non-accessibility of body camera footage being released to the public, and the timing for doing that. I know there was an incident in Oregon Friday night, and the press was on it because we can't get the body camera images yet. Those are all important factors as to when those become public knowledge.
Correct. And much like Oregon, in the only shooting that I'm have experience with was the standoff that was across the street here several years ago. And it wasn't one of our officers that fired shots. That was a multi-agency response to a standoff. And we would do the same thing. We did that in that instance, and anything that might happen in the future, hopefully it doesn't. But if we were to have any type of use of force like that, we would rely on the Ohio BCI to do that investigation. Our agency's not large enough. We don't deal with shootings that often. I haven't seen any more in my career, but they can come in and do a fair and impartial investigation. And as Chief Navarre had said in his press release, those videos then become the under the custody of the investigating agency. So it will be up to BCI to release those. Now, certainly, if there was something that would shed light on the subject, especially for the public and to maintain the public trust, I might, lobby them in that circumstance to try to do a release. But I guess it would just depend on the circumstances. Try to manage that incident the best possible. So, as Ms. Browning said, I had some of the same concerns with body cameras initially, because Ohio didn't have as robust law on that type of evidence. And people's individual privacy is important to me. A lot of times when we're going on these calls, it isn't a contentious thing. People are, having a problem at home or having a problem in their personal life, and I don't think that's always people's business. I think there's much more safeguards than there were initially to protect people's privacy and their identities, especially if they're not a victim of a crime or a suspect in a crime. A lot of that stuff is just we're trying to assist them in a time of need or a time of crisis. So, and that was a concern I had as well. And then the last thing I want to talk about is the hiring process. And the council thankfully approved, I much appreciate, they approved the legislation at the last meeting about our cadet position. And again, that cadet position allows us to look at candidates who are not already certified as police officers. And, it's especially today, it's a difficult decision as to whether you want to wear a uniform and represent your community in this type of fashion. And, some people might be called to that at a different time. And they may have not started out college, or, a young person coming out of high school may have not thought about that. Maybe something happens in their life, or they are somehow inspired to serve. And it just gives us more opportunity to give those people a chance to take the test. And it might help us with recruiting, from all aspects of the community, from all populations. So I think it's a step in the right direction. It's another thing that I've wanted to work on since becoming the chief, and I really appreciate the support on that. So I'll definitely take any questions.
This council has supported you both for the Lexapol contract, which was not inexpensive, and the cadet position, which is not as instant and not as economical as hiring a police officer from another department elsewhere.
Correct.
So we appreciate that support. And that is helping us lead into this collaborative approval. Okay, questions for the chief?
Chief Schnorr, I have a quick question, but before I do, I want to thank you for your opening remarks. They were definitely spot on. These are trying times, and I worry about you and all of our Sylvania police officers every day during these challenging times. And I thank you for your leadership, and continue to pray that all goes well in our community and beyond. Certainly our country has high risk right now. I do feel like you explained the body cams, but I'm not sure that I completely understood it. So I'm going to, take a step back there. The body cams obviously aren't on all of the time, but something you said made me think that there's something that triggers them turning on, and it's not up to the police officer to turn them on. Can you help me understand that?
Well, so there'll be a link system. So the camera system in the car is linked to the body camera. So right now, an officer, if I was working in the road patrol, I would have an audio pack. So I'd have it looks like a pager. Everybody remembers pagers that picks up the audio for the in-car camera. Under the new systems, your body camera is also the microphone for your in-car. So it gives you two videos, two audios. If let's say you're driving down the street and you suddenly have to hit your brakes, or you have to speed up to pursue an offender, your camera system will already come on based on certain settings: speed, heavy braking, the emergency lights coming on. That will also turn the camera. Some systems, and again, we're going to have to. The system can do many more things than we probably even needed to do, but we'll have to make some decisions because some agencies have your camera set up that if your camera's on, everybody's camera on. Now that would be good on a scene. That might not be good if somebody's in the, in the bathroom or something like that. It's if you're at the station. So it really depends on the circumstances. We'll have to figure out some of those settings. They can even, set those by proximity where they wouldn't all come out of the station, because you might be talking to somebody, confidentially, like a witness or something like that doesn't need to be recorded. And then the detectives are interviewing an in custody suspect right down the hall. So those are things that we haven't dealt with yet, but we'll have to figure those things out and work with the vendor to come up with the best solution for our community. The main thing is that when an officer has contact with a citizen in an official capacity, it has to be recorded. That's the expectation now, and that will continue with body cameras.
Thank you.
So, Chief, quickly, so is the thinking for them not just always being on somebody's shift, is that just the storage and the cost to store the data?
Yeah,
the reason.
Right. And again, they are on all the time.
That's kind of what I was getting at. I know you said that it could pick up like you wanted 5 minutes before it happens. So like it is.
It's right now. The only difference is it's not going to have audio during that time.
Gotcha.
And it's not like 5 minutes. It's probably 30 seconds.
Okay.
There are different settings. There are even ways to go back further depending on the vendor. The vendor that we're selecting has some of the best options that have more features than some of the other vendors. It is quite an expensive, venture. It's around $100,000, give or take. We are working with the vendor to get the final quote right now, and availability could be an issue as well. But there will be a learning curve with the rollback and all that. But we have the rollback. Currently, our system of in-cars has a rollback as well. It's not as advanced, but that's kind of a benchmark of most police cameras.
Chief, you mentioned that availability for the body camera, and you said sometime in the near future you're coming to us with a request. If, presuming for a moment that we approve it, how long, do you have a sense? Is it 6 months? Is it 8 months? Is it 3 months before this thing is up and running?
It's really hard to say. I would say it's probably, I would be happy if we had them in place by November. If we were able to get approval in July and pursue that's kind of my goal. The current system, there's no indication that it's going to fail. We do, like I said, we do have the in-car and taser cameras right now. We are fairly well protected, fairly well covered. But replacing our system and implementing the body cameras is a priority to me, and hoping to have that done here. Again, November would be my goal.
Chief, just to clarify, you've selected your vendor and you've tested these units already?
We have, and there are 2 of them in test mode in the field right now.
Okay.
Yeah, and the vendor is it's a Motorola product. So if you're familiar with Motorola, they make our radios. They're a mainstay in law enforcement. That's another reason. They also have a local vendor here in Lucas County. So right now our vendor is somewhere on the East Coast with the ship everything. We've been pretty much assured that if we have a problem, they'll just replace it right on site. So it's that's a huge factor is the logistics of the equipment.
The other one of the other things I wanted to inquire about, you mentioned about policies and procedures, and you were updating that obviously for this, certification that we're pursuing. But you also mentioned that by year end that it will be completely updated.
That's my goal. That's the goal.
Can you give us a sense of how that is likely to change from where we're at now with policies and procedures to best practices in the situation as we see it today?
Well, we're pretty fortunate that we have the content of our current policy and procedures is pretty good. It isn't, like I said, it's an old style a series of 3 reminders around the station, and it is updated by our own staff. So it's a periodic thing that we go through, and as typically as case law changes. So I mean, a lot of the policies and procedures, almost all the ones that are in the collaborative, except for a few that are new, we already have. And the way we're working with the vendor, myself and the 2 captains, we meet with their implementation specialist on the Lexipol side every week. And we spend about 2 hours and we cover about 4 or 5 policies per session. So I do some homework ahead of time. I have our meeting with that person. They're doing the content. We're approving the aspects of the content that would be applicable to our agency. There are certain things that they already have pre-written that are specific to Ohio law or federal law, and there are certain nuances of those policies that relate to us here locally. And those are the things that I have to prove one by one. So as we work through 130 policies, this past week we were able to complete 4. The day we worked on use of force, that pretty much took the entire session. So it really just, it will depend on what happens between now and then. If everyone's off on, time off and those sorts of things will affect the tempo of us completely. However, I prioritize the most sensitive to the beginning here. And a lot of the other policies, we have a similar policy already. It's just bringing it onto the new system in a new format. So right now, we really do have 2 policy manuals. We have some policies that are in electronic format and Lexipol. We still have our Sylvania Police Division manual, if you will, in hard copy.
So you brought up the use of force policy changes.
Yes.
Are we talking about minor modifications here, or are we talking about, we talking about small surgery or major surgery?
In substance, there really isn't any change for our procedures. What there is, again, it's in a different format. There are many more citations to federal and state law that we didn't always have listed, just because that wasn't the style. And a lot of that goes back to Chief Saab. Chief Saab really brought the Sylvania Police Department into the modern era with that procedure manual, which existed when I started here, which we were way ahead of the curve on many other agencies. And the content is there, but back when the old style was more, it was, let's say, a use of force policy might have been 7 pages, lots of introductions and long paragraphs. The newer format is much more concise and to the point, much more bulleted shalls and that sort of thing than long explanations. So that's the difference, but the content is pretty much the same. We don't, I can speak to you more specifically and show you how some examples. The newer policies do, as we had before, especially on use of force, stress, intervention by other officers if there's something out of line. That's something that's talked about a lot. Those concepts have been around for a long time. That's come to the forefront. And reporting, that's always been there as well. Reporting use of force and reviewing use of force. Those are some of the concepts you're going to hear a lot about. They've always existed. We've practiced those things here, but you're going to hear a lot about that when talking about use of force, reviewing, and intervention.
And I certainly know very little, if anything, about police work. Just as far as protocol goes, though, you're talking about approving changes to things like this. I guess I'm wondering if that's to Mr. Hand's question about setting up a safety committee meeting, whether these modifications, if they could be provided at least to me, or I don't know about other members of the safety committee or council in general, so that we were knowledgeable of what those changes are, current to the updated version. That would be helpful for me anyways, to understand what we're looking at and where we're headed.
That's a fair question for a knowledgeable councilman to want to know. And Mrs. Brining, I don't know whether these procedures need to be approved by council in action when they're done or not.
They don't need to be formally approved by council. I don't know what format you get them into. I was just looking to see if I had a copy of one that I've gotten, but they don't have to be formally approved by council. That's more administrative thing.
Okay, so it's not on that level, but for council to know what's going on, that's not inappropriate, I assume?
No, that's
as they're approved, we can certainly email them to council, especially the high liability policies like use of force. Those are going through legal vetting on the Lexipol side. They're also being, Mrs. Brining and I are walking through those, as well. Myself being responsible for those, I wouldn't want to deviate in any way, shape, or form from our legal counsel on those or what's in best practice. I certainly have no problem sharing those and talking about the concepts and why we would move to those. But I would be very concerned about making them populist, if you will, about how we do the policy. It's just, I would want to keep those within best practice.
And I understand that. I guess the other question is with the pace of change in our society and the way things are moving more quickly, what is your vision for how this time frame kind of sets up, recognizing that we're going from 3-ring binder to, online? Are we now, is that going to be an ongoing update as those things are necessary?
Correct.
Is that part of the process?
Right. What will happen is when our policy manual is complete, our relationship with Lexipol will not end. So we paid, I believe, don't quote me, but I think it was around $32,000 for the initial setup. That's what's called a full implementation. They have already downloaded our entire manual and cross-referenced it with everything that's in their manual. So there's a program that I can see where our current policies link up with the new policies. And then we talk about how, again, our initial policy book was based on the CALIA standard, which was very similar to what Lexipol is doing now. It's just older. It's something from 20 years ago, but the concepts are all there. And then we have updated with some of those things over the years ourselves, but this is a comprehensive update from top to bottom for all our policies. So after this has fully been implemented, after we work with our implementation specialists, update all of our policies, we will then have an annual contract with Lexipol, which will be much less than the initial cost. But in that contract, you'll get monthly training bulletins based on our policy procedure, which is a huge thing, and then the officers will electronically sign off on those things. And any updates that come down on those policies, just since we've started, I have 3 or 4 updates in my mailbox, but we haven't even gotten to the policies that the updates are for. So it's an ongoing, consistent thing. Again, we don't have a research and development office. We don't have someone assigned to writing policies. Mrs. Brining probably wanted to help. Especially in a high liability area like law enforcement, it's really required to keep everyone on the same page. In my view.
And I know from past conversations, Chief, that you're very focused on training. So how do these changes? How is the training implemented so that the officers get this information and that they understand exactly what modifications have occurred?
Well, from the policy side of it, they'll get an actual lesson plan and a little test from Lexipol that they'll have to complete in a certain amount of time, and they'll have to electronically sign off on that. That's not really good enough. That gets us past the policy review part of it. Many agencies, maybe that's all they do. Things like mental health response, de-escalation, use of force, firearms, response to active shooters. Those are trainings that we physically do in person. Those are every year. We were one of the first agencies in Northwest Ohio 5 years ago to implement the rescue task force, which is combining police and fire to respond into a scene of an active shooter. We do a lot of in-person training as well. Again, this year hasn't been the best because under COVID-19, we're not even allowed to train together really right yet because we can't have more than 10 people and we have to maintain social distancing. A lot of what we do is not socially distanced, you know what I mean? So, but those are things we've been doing. That's why you're not hearing a lot about, it's old news if we handle a mental health situation, properly, and it just doesn't, hear about it. And I can tell you as a chief, that's our biggest struggle right now is mental health incidents and mental health commitments and mental health crisis is definitely on the rise. That along with the heroin and fentanyl epidemic have been challenging for us to respond to. It's not a traditional law enforcement response. It's not the bad guy who just broke into a bank and was carrying sacks of money. It's completely different than that. There's many more shades of gray as far as what's the right answer. And all of our officers are CIT trained. If you're familiar with that, crisis intervention training through the mental health board here in Lucas County. So we're always trying to improve those things, but getting that physical documentation and having that training that's related to our policy and procedure to me is very important.
So, and this is something the mayor said earlier. Have you seen an uptick in the drug abuse and the mental health items since COVID kicked in here in Sylvania?
The types of calls kind of changed. Initially, we saw a rise in domestic violence, and then some depression-related calls, people calling in or check the safety where a family member hasn't heard from someone in a while. Those did seem to rise to the surface. The last 3 weeks, we've been back to our normal mix of everything that we usually do.
But there was a material shift.
Certainly, everybody was home and dealing with homebound issues. The first couple of weeks, it was domestic violence. People weren't used to being home that much, and they weren't getting on with their family members.
Understand.
Nothing drastic, but some of those things needed our intervention. Or 9 times out of 10, it's just when we're trying to settle a dispute and make a decision on if a person. Ohio has there's a very bright line in Ohio. If you assault or a family member or make that person fearful for their safety, you can be arrested if you don't have discretion on that. If it falls over the line, we have to take action.
That sounds like COVID-related operations to me, Mayor. Recognizing we still have to, that's the reason I asked the question.
And domestic violence is a dangerous position for the police officers to go into.
Thank you. I appreciate the help.
Certainly.
The information.
Certainly. Happy to discuss it.
Hearing no further questions, Mrs. Westfall, there was a request for a safety committee meeting.
Well, I do have a few questions. I'm sorry. Before you get away, Chief. First, I want to echo the comments of the mayor and Mrs. Westfall and commending you and your officers for the work you've done in recent weeks dealing with the issues that we're dealing with as a nation. And I was particularly pleased and proud of the way you and the city responded to the peaceful protests in our city over the last couple of weeks. I think that reflects well on all of us. I am very interested in the reason I suggested we should have a safety committee meeting is I would really like to hear from you in greater detail about the policies that we've apparently adopted and are implementing with respect to the use of force and the recruiting and hiring of minority cadet candidates going forward. Two of the issues that are focal points of the collaborative issue, and I appreciate your discussions here today. But I would like to go into. I'd like to hear more about both of those, and also how those. And I'd like to know more about the policies regarding the implementation and use of the body cams and the car cams going forward. I had forgotten about the taser cams, although when you mentioned it, it did jog my memory. I always thought those were interesting. But I'd also like to talk to you a little bit about the history of lethal force in Sylvania. I mean, during my time on council, I have not received a single complaint of over policing or racial profiling. I don't think this is, my sense is this isn't a problem in Sylvania, but again, I'd like to discuss that, and I'd like to discuss some of your thoughts going forward on policing, as we are seeing a lot of discussions now about changing the police paradigm, about involving other social agencies in some of the response activities that have traditionally fallen on police. And I think as council members, it's incumbent upon us to have these discussions. And it's not because I necessarily believe that there is anything in particular we need to change or do, but I think it's something that we are called upon to re-examine, rethink, and maybe confirm exactly what we are doing, but also being open to the possibility that there may be some changes that we'd want to make as well. And again, I can't say enough that my sense of the way we police in Sylvania is extraordinarily good. I think clearly focused on serving our community. And I have nothing but the greatest respect for your leadership and leadership of your predecessors and the way we do things in Sylvania. But that doesn't change the fact that I think as members of council, we are called upon to look at these things again, particularly as you said, these are trying times in policing. They're not trying because of things that have happened here, but the things that have happened elsewhere across the country have an impact on our community as well. And I just want to, I think it's important that we go through the exercise of re-examining these things, having that discussion, and confirming what we're doing. And that's why I think, I also don't think council meeting is a place to do that. And I think a good place to do that would be in a safety committee meeting, and maybe at least one, and we'll see how that goes, how much time we need, and maybe a series of them. So Mary, I know I talked with you about this earlier today. I talked with Mark a little bit about it as well. I realize I am not on the safety committee. I would certainly participate in that meeting as I do in all the committee meetings that I want to go to. So, but that's my thinking.
Thank you, Mr. Hanum. Chief Schnorr, I know that was a tall order. Sounds like he's going to do a whole review of everything, but I would say certainly Mr. Hanum can meet with you in advance if he's got some one-on-one conversations. But I do feel like you outlined today elements of all of these pieces, the policies and procedures, the collaborative efforts that you've got going, what's going on in terms of the body cams for the future, talking about the changing policies, talking about the use of force policies. And what I think I heard you say is that all of those are in process right now in evaluation. It probably isn't the best time to sit down and ask for a comprehensive overview. But what I would ask is that Mr. Aller and you could keep us apprised and let us know when would be the appropriate time to have a safety committee meeting to really get the answers to these things and to have that dialogue. My guess is that's a couple months down the road based on what I heard you say today. I don't need an immediate response. I do think Mr. Hanum makes a very valid point. We have a very interested council. Our safety committee members are very dedicated and sincerely want to understand the good work that you're doing. But most importantly, I think we want to make sure that we're at a point where you have the answers and you're not in a position where you're saying, well, we're working on that and that's November and that's, we want you to be able to be as informed as you can be as you try to educate us.
Certainly, we'd be happy to showcase those things and, continue to bolster the confidence in the agency.
And I don't think there's a need to bolster confidence. There's immense confidence, but I do think it's just informing our council members.
Mrs. Westphal, let me clarify something. I thought we've applied for the certification, correct? Did I? Okay. And so we have in place policies regarding the use of force and the recruitment of minority candidates, correct?
Yes.
So those aren't in process. Those are in place today.
Yes.
And I guess if nobody else is interested in, be happy to meet with you independently to review those. But I think the time is now to look into those policies and for council to understand those. And if nobody else is interested, that I'd be happy to meet with you one-on-one.
Mr. Hanum, I don't think that it's fair to suggest that any council member is not interested. I think that you're doing a far overreach there. I'm trying to be efficient with our leadership time here and with our chief's time and make sure that we are not putting in place some meetings that are not going to be effective at this point in time. Certainly he shared that he would distribute the policies as they're prepared. So we do have that opportunity to look at them. And certainly we did ask him to do and have a conversation with Mr. Aller and let us know when would be an appropriate time to have this conversation to maximize our efficiency. So with that, certainly if there's a member of the safety committee that feels we need to schedule a meeting tonight, we do meet again in July. We may be ready to schedule at that point, but I'd like to give you the opportunity to give us some feedback about what makes sense from the timing.
Mary, I want to respond one time, and that is, I think the time to have this discussion about our use of force policies and our minority recruitment policies is now, not sometime later. I think the time is now, and I think it's consistent with, I think that is consistent with what we're seeing going on in across our nation. And so I just want to go on record that I believe we ought to have we as a council should be collectively looking at what we have in place now, making sure that we understand those policies, particularly with regard to use of force and recruitment of minority candidates, and that we are in agreement with those. I don't think there's any reason to put that off. And so I don't share your idea that would be a waste of time. I think
I didn't say it would be a waste of time, and I did open it up to discussion among our safety committee members if they thought there was a need. Chief Schnorr.
This is not, let me finish, Mary. This is not a matter of safety committee. This is a matter for city council. And I'm not deferring to the safety committee on the issue of examining and understanding the policies that we have adopted and put in place. As safety committee chair, you are free to inquire of them. As a member of council, I'm concerned about those right now.
Chief Schnorr.
As Mr. Hanum said, those policies are in place in the new lexical, those two, the hiring and the use of force. And the use of force has been in place since I started here in '94. Again, changes, updates. If it would help to have, I'm ready and able, willing to have a meeting whenever you'd like to.
Thank you.
Mrs. Westphal, if I could suggest perhaps a middle ground, perhaps, that the chief sends out those policies as they exist today to all members of council so that we have an opportunity to review them. And then if we have concerns, we can reach out to the mayor and the chief directly or Mr. Aller. And to the extent that it involves the legal part of it, Mrs. Browning, and meet with individual members of administration as necessary in the interim between now and when that time frame comes. I think that would help me be prepared for when the time for the meeting would come. I'm okay with holding off on the meeting, but I would like to understand what we've been operating under and what we're operating under going forward.
And I do think that's what we had talked about, was you distributing the policies.
Yes.
Currently.
Yes.
That you have available.
And I just will add, just anecdotally, once, probably fairly soon, again, we're going through the steps of the implementation with this vendor. Our policies will be online as this process moves on. I'm thinking maybe at the halfway point, we'll start to have those on our website. Mm-hmm. That is, most progressive agencies do that. They're not a secret, public record. The collaborative is a statewide effort as well. And our policies are going to look very much like a collaborative. There might be a couple of words that are different to say Sylvania or specific to our procedures, but we're going to follow the best practices that the rest of the departments in the state have adopted. And we really are already in the majority. Some of those things we just didn't have the policy on. Some of the things that are added by the collaborative.
So I think it'll be helpful for us to be able to take a look at those.
Mr. McCann, you look like you had something to say.
Well, I did, but the specific question was, does the use of force policy meet with the collaborative's efforts?
Yes. So
And that's it.
again, the new Lexipol advised policy that Mrs. Brining and I have gone over actually has tags right to the collaborative within the policy.
Right.
It's tagged to Ohio law, federal law, and the Ohio collaborative.
Thank you very much.
So you'll distribute those policies. If people have questions, they can reach out. And if we determine that there's enough need to have a meeting, we can go ahead and schedule them.
Certainly, happy to discuss those issues anytime.
We'll distribute those to all members of City Council, not just the Safety Committee. You're welcome, Mr. Hanem's visit tomorrow morning. If you'd like to come in tomorrow morning.
We had a few discussions over the last year or so.
All right.
Welcome anything.
Sooner the better, it sounds like.
Certainly.
Okay.
Thank you. Sorry.
Thanks for that update, Chief Snor. Moving on to agenda item 7. This is a delayed issue. Bid dates are running out. We previously took bids and brought to City Council bids for repaving streets in the Brookfield Estates neighborhood. Mr. Aller.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. We did hold off. Council had asked for that item to be tabled a couple meetings ago. However, we're at the stage now where this would be the last meeting that we have until we would essentially lose those bids and the bidding process again. So we brought it back asking that it be approved. The bids were 13%, over 13% under the engineer's estimate. Gherkin Paving had the low bid in the amount of $255,108.27. And we would ask for approval to be able to move forward with the project.
Mr. Eller, if I may. Not knowing about the $1 million for the July 15th timeframe, I'm still a little nervous. Not knowing how much of that money we're going to collect because of the delay. Is there any chance that Gherkin would extend their offer beyond the time frame in the bid response?
We could reach out to them, but we won't meet again until after that time is done. So if they said no, then we lose bids. I would point out too that the $1 million that we haven't received yet, those are operating funds. These come out of capital funds.
I understand, but at the same time, money has mobility.
No.
Well,
not in the government world.
Well, but there's other things that can be adjusted with income tax receipts and other things if we really needed to. But that's. What do you think if we sit tight on this? What do you think the bids would come in at again? Do you think they would be of a similar nature? Do you have any reason to think that they would increase if we waited till fall?
I think there's a potential for them to increase because the contract is scheduled to be full by then. So I think there's a potential for them to increase. Yes.
What's the PCR rating on these streets right now?
They're all in the 50s or lower. They're our lowest rated. I should say they're the lowest rated. We do have some that are lower rated, but we're looking at a much larger project for those. But they're the lowest rated that are eligible for resurfacing.
So in your judgment, we need to move on this. We can't wait till next year, or if we get pushed out because of the scheduling.
I wouldn't. I would recommend moving forward with the construction. It's like your home. The carpet will always last another year. And,
Well, I know, that's why I'm asking you what the PCR rating was.
but it's, if we let these go too long, then the water and everything that's getting into them now, will continue to grow. And we'll go from a resurfacing to a reconstruction and double the cost.
Mhm.
So,
Mr. Schroyer, are you still with us? Mr. Schroyer?
I am here, Mayor.
All right, I saw you unmuted. What is the balance in our capital improvement fund?
It's still hasn't changed. It still hasn't changed much. It's right around the 10 million.
All right, and this project is $255,000. These are dedicated capital improvement funds put there by our taxpayers to pave their streets. I think this is a project that should move forward. It sends the wrong message if we don't. We've been all along saying we're not cutting back on services, and we cannot use these funds for operations. We are currently trying to correct earlier transfers of capital improvement funds to the general fund with the state auditor, and we are working year by year to correct that citation, which I know Mr. Hanem doesn't agree with and I don't agree with, but it's still a citation. I also would like to remind council that as far as general fund money, last council meeting, you saw fit to spend 3.5 times what the low bid was for the design of the city calendar. I did not sign that legislation because I thought that was inappropriate to do. And I would hate to try and answer a question why you can spend 3.5 times for the design of the city calendar, but you can't pave a resident's street. I will have to refer those calls to you if you don't approve this funding. This is appropriate expenditure of funding. It's 2.5% of our capital improvement fund. I think it is short-sighted not to proceed and take bids that are 13.2% under budget. And I call for passage of ordinance 26/2020.
Mr. Mayor, I'm sorry, this is Mr. Hanem. I was muted. I would like to join in Mr. Fry's, I don't know if it was a suggestion or that we approach Gherkin and see if we can't get a 30-day, get an extension beyond the July 15th deadline. As you said, Mr. Mayor, I think your quote was, we'll have to wait until July 15th to really know where we are at. And I think you're right about that. I would like to know where we are on July 15th. And there are two items on the this item and the next item on our agenda involve expenditure of capital funds, and I really don't have a problem with or any issue with the Monroe Street Haroon Road improvement project issue moving forward in light of the huge, substantial, dominating contribution by the state of Ohio to that project. I do have concerns with this Brookfield Estates resurfacing project, and I will note that the cost of this project is, I believe, $255,000. And I will be happy to explain to anyone who is upset that we didn't go forward with that, how that's different than spending less than $10,000 on the city calendar. But so I would like to see us approach Gherkin and see if we get a 30-day or whatever extension we need to get beyond that July 15th date and understand where we are. And the other possibility is if they wouldn't agree to that extension, we could have an emergency council meeting to revisit this issue. Before, when does the bid expire?
It's like June 18th to me, or July. When is it?
Yeah, it would
Kevin?
be. Oh, I'm sorry.
I looked at the wrong date.
June 29th.
So that's, we have a couple of weeks to approach Gurkha and see if we can extend that. And if not, we could have an emergency council meeting to consider it at that time, after we hear from Gurkha.
Mr. Hanner, are you suggesting we extend it 30 days and then we pass it?
No, I'm suggesting that we approach Gherkin to get an extension of their bid beyond the time where we have an understanding of what sort of revenues come in on July 15th. So it may be, you'd have to ask Toby how much time we need beyond July 15th. Maybe a 30-day extension of the Gherkin bid or a 45-day extension. That's what I would suggest we do.
Mr. Mayor, may I ask Mr. Schroyer a question?
Absolutely.
Mr. Schroyer, you're up to you roll your sleeves up every day and you're dealing with these finances for the city. What's your gut tell you for the July 15th payment? Are we going to get all that money, or are we going to get 60% of that money?
I think we're going to get the majority of it, yes.
So majority meaning 51% or meaning 90%?
90, let's say 90. I remember this is for last year. So the only thing we wouldn't be getting are people that just aren't going to pay their tax. And I just don't see that as a huge base in the city of Sylvania.
So, Mr. Mayor, I had a comment. So let's say, hypothetically, if July 15th comes and the worst does happen and we collect 50% of what we expected, this could still cost $600,000 next year if it turns into a full redo instead of a repay. Is that correct, Mr. Rowd?
The potential's there, yeah.
So even if July 15th doesn't turn out how we want, I mean, maybe this is a question for Toby, but is it still financially smart to just to do it anyway, to pay $293 today instead of paying $600,000 next year, which to me seems like that makes sense.
It would be my recommendation in a worst case scenario, which is pretty likely, that this money is going to come out of the balance, the $10 million balance. But I believe that's what the balance is there for. If the service director is recommending that we go forward with this, I don't know why we're splitting hairs on whether the annual budget is going to accomplish or pay for this. I think more than likely it's going to be coming out of our carry forward rainy fund balance. And I think that's what council maybe needs to get their heads wrapped around, that it's coming out of that balance. It's not coming out of the annual budget. We're going to be down somewhat this year on an annual basis, and a project like this is going to need to come out of that carry forward balance.
Based on Mr. Schroyer's comments about the July 15th collections, I'm willing to move the motion forward, Mr. Mayor.
I think a vote is appropriate in this case.
Mr. Mayor, I would like to introduce ordinance number 26, 2020. All members of council having previously received copies, I will read by title only. Accepting the bid of Gherkin Paving Incorporated and awarding the contract for the Brookfield Estates resurfacing project, same, authorizing expenditure for the improvements in the amount of $255,108.27, appropriating funds therefore, waiving the second and third readings and declaring an emergency.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that ordinance number 26, 2020 be read by title only and the second and third readings be waived. All in favor of that indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Final passage.
Thank you, Mr. Ryan. I move final passage of ordinance number 26, 2020 as an emergency measure.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded for final passage of ordinance 26, 2020 as an emergency measure. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
Will the clerk please call the roll?
Mrs. Capellini? Yes. Mr. Fry?
Yes.
Mr. Hanem?
No.
Mr. McCann?
Yes.
Mr. Richardson?
Yes.
Ms. Stowe?
Yes.
Mrs. Westfall?
Yes.
Vote is 6-1. The motion passes and ordinance number 26, 2020 is approved. Moving on to agenda item E. This is concerned to property acquisition for the Monroe Street Haroon Road Improvement Project. Mr. Aller.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As you know, this is a joint project with ODOT. The funds that are involved in this project are actual federal highway administration funds. It was a specific safety initiative started by FHWA and administered through ODOT. When we put the original application together and working with ODOT, it was anticipated that we would have approximately $167,500 in right-of-way acquisition costs. When we got into the final design, it was discovered that an additional turning lane, actually the queue for the turning lane on Monroe Street to westbound Monroe Street to southbound Haroon, that queue lane actually had to be longer than what was originally anticipated in the preliminary study. And because of that, we're having to acquire additional right-of-way. So that has taken the estimate for right-of-way acquisition from $167,500 to a total of $279,694. Those are estimates. There's been no offers made to any property. Those are just strictly estimates. The federal, this program caps the federal participation in the right-of-way acquisition cost at $150,750. So our share of the original amount was $16,750. Because of that federal cap, any cost beyond the original acquisition costs that were anticipated, that has to be paid by the local agency. So our share could potentially go up. The appraisals are just in process right now, and that will define the numbers for sure. But we could be requesting for an additional $128,944 enabled to fund our local share of the right-of-way acquisition costs. This is a standard process with ODOT, especially with federal highway money. We would recommend that we move forward with this. Right-of-way they have started the investigation into appraisals and things of that nature, but no offers can be made to any of the property owners until this agreement is in place. So if you recall, this project is approximately $1.8 million, and our cost initially would have been in the neighborhood of about $180,000. This would take our cost of that project from a $1.9 million project, and would make our participation approximately $100,000. So I would still recommend that we move forward and approve the agreement with ODOT.
Mr. Aller, the acquisition cost of $179,694 is an awful exact number since we're dealing with right-of-way acquisition. Is that based on some formula? I'm assuming it is.
It's based at this stage. It's just based on we don't know the land area that we're taking in. It's a commercial zoned area, and so they just throw a blanket There have been no, as I indicated, no appraisals or anything. We're still in the process.
Okay. Yeah. Just seemed like an office specific number. That's why I figured it had to be something.
You know, sometimes you get down to 26 cents on a $20 million project. So,
I understand.
This could prove to be a difficult property acquisition.
I understand.
All right, so you've delineated that it will be a $1.9 million safety improvement project. The city's exposure is about $300,000 for it if we approve this. This was a project brought to us by ODOT, as I recall, for one of the, is it 10 most dangerous intersections or one?
We were actually in the, they studied the top 6 intersections as far as accident counts are concerned in Lucas County. And the proposed improvements to this intersection was the one that they felt had the largest cost of benefit impact. And so our project was chosen.
It is a good improvement, but it is not going to be an easy property acquisition. All right. Mr. Fry, you do have ordinance 40, 2020.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to introduce ordinance 40, 2020. All members of council having previously received copies, I will read by title only. Authorizing the mayor and director of finance to enter into a real estate agreement number 34971 between the state of Ohio Department of Transportation and the city of Sylvania for right-of-way acquisition relative to the Monroe Street and Maroon Road improvement project, appropriating funds for the anticipated right-of-way acquisition cost in the amount of $128,944, waiving the second and third readings and declaring an emergency.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that ordinance number 40, 2020 be read by title only and the second and third readings be waived. All in favor of that indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Final passage.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move final passage of ordinance number 40, 2020 as an emergency measure.
Second.
Moved and seconded for final passage of ordinance 40, 2020 as an emergency measure. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries and ordinance 40, 2020 is approved. Moving to agenda item 9. You've had reports previously about the great success the city and the township are showing in cooperation for the establishment of the first Joint Economic Development District, or JED, between our communities after decades of trying to get one of these started. Both subdivisions have approved the JED agreement, and one of our responsibilities is to appoint a member to that JED board of directors. You have legislation in your council packets to appoint Mr. Sanford, who has been at the forefront of the negotiations for this JED, to be our representative on that board. We have resolution number 15, 2020 to accomplish that. Mr. Sanford, any comments?
Yes, Mayor, just to add that there's 5 members to the board, city, township, a member representing the owners of the property, and in this case would be Oakley, that's within the district, and then a member representing the employees, and then those 4 board members will select the 5th board member. And then once the territory is established, then it's treated as a part of the city for taxing purposes, and that's when Toby would get involved in collect income tax.
And that 5-member board arrangement is set by state law? Okay. I recommend the appointment of Mr. Sanford. Mrs. Westfall.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to introduce resolution number 15-2020. All members of council having received copies in advance, I'll read by title only. Appointing William D. Sanford to the Sylvania JED 1 Board of Directors for a term of 1 year, waiving the second and third readings and declaring an emergency.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that resolution number 15, 2020 be read by title only and the second and third readings be waived. All in favor of that indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Final passage.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to move final passage of resolution number 15-2020.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded for final passage of resolution 15, 2020 as an emergency measure. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries and resolution 15, 2020 is approved. Thank you, Mr. Sanford, for your efforts to successfully negotiate with the township, and Mrs. Brining as well. This has been a long process. I thank also Mr. Oliver at the township. He has been instrumental in helping to move this project along. Moving on to agenda item 10. We have a petition for a zoning change from R3 to PRO for property located at 6710 Maplewood. It's in your council packets. This is for referral to the Planning Commission. Mr. Aller, I do have a question about this map. I believe the property you're referring to is on the north side of Maplewood. The map shows two properties outlined. Is the other property outlined to the south the existing PRO zone property?
Please work out.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So don't be confused with that. It's an even numbered parcel or address. So it's the property on the north side of the street.
That's correct.
And it is outlined on the property. It fronts both on Maplewood and it makes a connection to Lane Drive to the east. That's the property we're talking about. I'm sorry, say that again?
The former Kemper property.
That's the one on the south side.
That's the south side, yes. We're talking about the one on the north side,
Right.
which is currently owned by the applicant, Joyce Donnery.
Right.
All right, again, this is for referral to the Plan Commission. They will get back to your recommendation and we'll have to follow the normal procedure, which is they set a public hearing and process it as normal. Mr. Hainham, can you make a motion?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, I move referral of zoning application number ZA-2-2020 to the Planning Commission for its review and recommendation.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to refer zoning application 2-2020 to the Planning Commission for their review and recommendation. All in favor of that indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. And the Plan Commission does meet in on July 15th, prior to your next meeting on July 20th. Okay, moving on to agenda item 11, committee reports. A, Building and Grounds Committee meeting held on June 8th. Ms. Dow.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. On June 8th at 9 a.m., the Buildings and Grounds Committee met to discuss the potential expansion of DORA. In attendance was myself, Ms. Dow, the chair of the committee, King Capellini, Patrick Richardson, Mark Fry. In addition, Peter Schnorr, Leslie Brining, Bill Sanford, Kevin Allert, and Doug Peter were present. Properties that are under consideration must be owned by the city, and that includes the Historical Village, the Sister City Park, which is behind the museum, Maplewood Square Park at Main and Maplewood, River Center Park at Main and Monroe, as well as parking. The DORA expansion is a long-term change that requires consideration for both current and safety recommendations and for the potential use post-pandemic. So during that meeting, we discussed a number of things, trying to explore whether or not this would be a safe, reasonable, and necessary, or maybe not even necessary, but something that would benefit our residences in a way that helps not only with our current situation of highly valued outdoor space, but also long into the future to make sure that the downtown area is strong. So some of the things that we discussed, Chief Schnorr was kind enough to give us some of his input on it. And essentially, no officer is currently available for dedicated monitoring at these sites. It would only have to be an occasional officer when they have extra time. And that's for regarding the security of this. Generally, the more open and visible a site is, it means the easier it is to secure and the lower risk of issues. That's something we should keep in mind during these discussions. In relation to the other properties, Historical Village and Sister City Park are secluded, including the nearby parking lot behind the museum. Nearby residential neighborhoods could also be a concern due to noise and proximity. Extending door to parking lots is discouraged due to separation from the street and the ease of drinking on the way to drive a car. Maplewood Square Park, which is the one at Maplewood and Main, that has high visibility and is central to the Dora district. But at the time of the meeting, Maplewood was not owned by the city, but is leased, and Leslie Briding was awaiting confirmation on whether that land leased by the city would be possible to fall under the road regulation for acceptable boundaries. River Center Park has a high visibility, but is next to a high traffic street, so it could be a popular one so almost complete, but traffic from someone has increased. However, that would be the only property south of Monroe Street to be permitted to be included and could cause boundary confusion. Hours and closing sections of Dora for either the Historical Village or other parts of the Dora potential inclusion. There was unknown legalities for that, and so Leslie Briding was looking to see whether or not we could make exception for different areas, and that's because specifically for the Historical Village, student programming happens during the day, and there's concerns about whether or not having open containers during school programs would be an issue. Also on occasion, to increase the revenue of Historical Village, host private events, and there could also be some issues between Dora and those events. In addition, the question was brought up of who would hold liability if something is damaged. There are restrooms in front of the village. Currently, the restrooms are, for the most part, used for school programming, and Heritage Sylvania, who is currently in charge of maintaining those restrooms, does not have the resources to meet the regulations for socially distant current necessary cleaning schedules, and then even looking beyond past this, would not be able to do a daily cleaning. So the question's brought up of who would be responsible for it. Temporary Maplewood Dora pedestrian space has been shown to be popular so far, but has also had some issues that need to be addressed. And that was in an effort to respond to needs of the area in a trial format to see if we can help in the meantime. Environmental Design Group may have recommendations based on an upcoming downtown master plan, but we do not have that yet. There could also be potential ties to a potential upcoming Maplewood engineering project. And so it was decided that we will observe Maplewood and Dora over the next month or however it stands to assess demand for expanded outdoor space for pedestrians. And given how that trial goes and the new parklets that have been installed, and also since Toledo has incorporated more closed streets, seeing how everything balances out over the course of that month. We have scheduled another Buildings and Grounds Committee meeting for 8 a.m. on Thursday, July 16th at Council Chambers to further discuss this. But in general, there are a number of questions and issues that were brought up that need more time and thought before we pass a permanent legislation for questionable properties. Thank you for the chance to make the update.
Thank you. Questions for Lindsay? I would like Mrs. Briding to report on her findings concerning the mini park.
Thank you. As Ms. Stout indicated in her report, I was waiting for a couple of answers back from the Ohio Department of Commerce before the committee meeting. Since our meeting, I did get answers to those questions. The first is that we can include the mini park in the Dora, which is really great. The obvious. Yes, exactly. And the second The second issue, concerns that we had relative to Heritage Sylvania, the hours and blocking off, we can establish different rules for different parts of the DORA territory without it needing to be a specific separate DORA. That was my concern because we don't have the population to support the establishment of 2 DORAs, but being able to, we do have some flexibility with roping areas off and having different hours for different areas within the singular DORA. So, good news.
All right. We feel it necessary to talk to Reeves to make sure they don't object to this. They are the owners of the property. Collectively, we don't think they'll have a problem with it, but we need to be in contact with them to talk about it. In the meantime, Mr. Sanford and Mrs. Brining prepared what we handed out to you, which is an application to the Sylvania City Council to expand the current DORA to include the mini park.
Exactly. This is the first procedural step that we need to take in order to fully incorporate the mini park into the DORA.
And what is the process and what could be the schedule to get that done?
So now that we have the application just submitted, within 45 days after it's filed, my anticipation is by the meeting in July, you could potentially have the public hearing before that meeting and have the ordinance prepared to amend the DORA to include the mini park at the July meeting. It's a tight timeline, but we can get it done.
I don't count 45 days between now and July 20th.
It's, we could also, it's only, it's third week can have 30 days.
30 days. Okay.
It's 45 days from the date the application is filed. The city council has to act on it.
All right. Thank you for that clarification.
Yeah, sorry about that.
My recommendation moving forward would be for city council to take the action recommended by Mrs. Brining and file this application. And we'll talk to Reeve Funeral Home, and we could tentatively set a public hearing for July 20th prior to the council meeting.
There is one already at 7, I believe.
We'd have to schedule it before that. There's a public hearing concerning the South Briar zoning change. But we could schedule it at 6:30 or something like that. I think it's a priority to do this. It has not been a Chief Snore. You have done a wonderful job avoiding confrontations in our DORA. I've had concerns about the mini park. I have personally seen people with DORA cups in the mini park. I even saw a well-known local attorney see me ride by and get a concerned look on his face when he saw me drinking there illegally. We are not taking any action against people like that.
Well, as we talked, during the report, I don't have a dedicated patrol there. We've responded to 2 complaints that I know of since the DORA started. One was a problem at an establishment. It was just during the DORA time. It was specifically related to a DORA cup usage or anything. But it was during the time the DORA was going on, people were enjoying the DORA. That incident basically came with that issue that the person had an outstanding warrant not related to the activity. The other were some complaints, but specifically one issue about noise and problems in the mid-pool closure. So,
which we'll talk about next.
Right, but so those are the only incidents I know of. We're not specifically patrolling it, and again, a lot of the things going on right now, we're not really trying to avoid conflicts if we can with the public. There's a lot going on right now. But that being said, if there are problems that could be an issue with public safety, we would address those. I don't have a dedicated patrol, so that's probably leaving a little bit more of an opportunity for people to do things like that. I will say when we were there for the protest on Thursday, I had my hands full with making sure that went smoothly. there were people riding bicycles, drinking Pandora cups. That is, consuming an alcoholic beverage while you can't do that. You're still operating a vehicle. I know it's a bicycle, but if you know any of those folks, they seem very comfortable riding around, and they must live somewhat close to their own bicycles. So I think we need to do some education with that, and we might be able to do that, with the officers in person. But it's nice to have the door, but we have to remember that there are certain laws, and as people consume, they forget about those. So something we just need to be, exercise some prevention, I guess.
Thank you. Yeah. Leslie, we need a motion to file this application.
Yes.
That would do it?
A motion to accept the application and set a public hearing date.
I move that we accept the application to City Council for the expansion of the City of Sylvania designated outdoor refreshment area.
Second.
And should we add on to that and set a public hearing date of July 20th at 6:30 p.m.?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded to accept the application and set the public hearing date for it for Monday, July 20th at 6:30 p.m. in this council chamber. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes, and we will start counting the days to that public hearing. Does that public hearing get a formal advertisement?
Yes, once a week for 2 consecutive weeks.
So we'll get that in the paper as well. Okay, with that, I would like to move the conversation on to the complaints that the administration has been fielding concerning the Maplewood closure, and to have a discussion that the circumstances have changed. When the administration and I took action to close Maplewood, there was no inside service from our local restaurants or bars. Since then, both Inside the Five opened their second floor and they can serve people up there. I believe that their service area, the service numbers are almost the same as they were prior to social distancing. J&G's has recently reopened their business for inside restaurant. Well, they've had to take out the center tables to do it. They've also put more picnic tables on the north side of their building on the south side of Maplewood. The DSA has successfully installed the downtown parklets, providing more outdoor seating. And it appears that the mini park will also be available for the Dora area. To me, that's a large change of circumstances, and balanced against the negative reports that we're receiving from property owners, both in the downtown and further west on Maplewood. I need council's discussion concerning a time schedule to reopen Maplewood. I think there is now sufficient outdoor seating area, but we are receiving complaints which are not confirmed. Obviously, the chief doesn't have these as filed charges or anything, but of rowdiness and drug abuse on that block. And a local property owner is complaining that it is hurting his foot traffic into his store, and that he can't rent one of his spaces. And we have present with us tonight, if she wishes to speak, I believe a resident of one of the 3 apartments in that building. It's entirely up to you.
I would like to speak.
Then I need you to come up to the podium and tell us who you are.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you for your patience getting here. This took a lot longer than the 40 minutes I told you.
Thank you. Welcome. I was not prepared to speak tonight, but after listening to the proceedings, I would like to just point out a couple of things. I live at 5693 Main Street, apartment 3 above Fiddlesticks. My apartment faces both Main and Maplewood. All of those windows.
It's got to be a beautiful apartment.
It's a beautiful apartment, and it was lovely until Dora came.
The clerk needs your name. I'm sorry.
Oh, Sheila?
Schoen. Schoen.
Thank you.
Once Maplewood was blocked off, things changed dramatically for our residents upstairs above Fiddlesticks. We not only lost 4 parking places, we gained a lot of loud, rude, crude, pot smoking people that yell up at our apartment windows. It's absolutely intolerable. You have to go to bed at night in a decent hour to get up and go to work. You can't sleep. You can't imagine. You can think of how close that is. It is extremely loud. A couple of things I jotted down. I have seen the drinking over in the small park that's not Dora. It just spills everywhere, the drinking. It's not necessarily very clean and tidy when I go to get to my car in the morning. I don't know who's responsible for cleaning that area, but they're not cleaning it. I think that this also encourages perhaps driving while intoxicated, driving with open container, people on the bicycles. It seems as if the rules of public intox and noise are being ignored. Let's see what else. I was wondering if Dora did come with a time limit, with a noise ordinance, with something to give the people who live down here every day, something to hang on to that's hopeful. Instead, I'm hearing Dora's expanding. Imagine.
Was the door a problem for you before Maplewood was closed?
It has been a problem. Last summer, before COVID, on Redbird walks, it's pretty tough to navigate getting home from work, carrying your groceries in, and dealing with the people. Now, I'm sympathetic that we want to break downtown and we want to bring people there and we want to sell our services there. I'm not against all that. But this last closure of Maplewood has made it's just obnoxious. And I don't think we want to bring that crime into our city. I have not called the police. My neighbor has. I will. Usually they say, well, they have a permit. I don't know if Dora has a permit for all this, but it's really quite disturbing.
For legal alcohol consumption, they have a permit.
But for noise and time?
City Council set the times from noon to midnight. Yes.
Okay. That's very late because the later it gets, the louder it gets, the more obnoxious it gets. And then I don't assume these people are walking home. I assume they're getting in a vehicle and driving while intoxicated. There's also a heavy smell of marijuana up in our apartments. That's another big problem.
All right. We appreciate your comments
Thank
very
you,
much.
Mr. Mayor.
I want to hear council's opinion on this. I had asked Mr. Aller to come prepared with a recommendation on possibly reopening Maplewood. It's already been determined we need to open it before the start of school, but with the situation changing and all these other seating areas becoming available, it's my intent to send Mr. Sanford to talk to Inside the Five and to talk to J&G about reopening Maplewood, probably a week from today. But I want to hear council's input on that in your positions prior to taking that action.
Mr. Mayor, just for a point of clarification, to reopen Maplewood, would that have to take an act with council? Maybe this is for Ms. Browning.
No, that does not require council action. That is a mayor, and in this case, it was a mayoral. He's the conservative piece, and
Gotcha. Did we pass a resolution to close it?
No.
Okay, I couldn't remember how that
Yeah,
was.
initially when we had the committee of the whole meeting, I think that came up, and then I did some additional research into the charter and look at what covers, and I realized we didn't need one. So,
And we reported on that in the committee meeting that there wasn't a need for us to actually advance the legislation.
Yes, thank you.
It has been a success for our downtown, but there are downsides to it as well. It has a limited life based on the start of school and school bus circulation beginning in August. But based on the changes, it appears that it's time to make a change.
Mr. Mayor, may
Yes.
I am so sorry that you've been having these issues. That certainly I don't think was the intention of anyone on council to bring trouble to the downtown area. I wonder if perhaps instead of closing down the west side of Maplewood, if perhaps temporarily on maybe just weekends, closing down the east side of Maplewood, since that would be next to the Maplewood Park, which would already be a part of this future expanded door area. It would be further away from your apartment, so hopefully the sound would be less, or some of maybe I think I read the issues of people trying to look in and things. That would be for the distance, so maybe that would help address that. And if it's just on the weekends, then it would also help address the issue of hours needing to wake up early in the morning for work the next day. And it would also clear the parking spots that were concerned with the business on the first floor. I was wondering whether you and the administration or other council
We
members
already just started discussions with that, and I need Mr. Haller to help me with this one. And Mr. Sanford has given us the understanding that in Toledo, where they're closing streets just for Friday and Saturday nights, that the business owners are doing the barricades and setting the tables where they need to be. The idea of connecting the mini park with the new tables that are put out on the north side of the J&G building. And if council doesn't know, J&G is contemplating putting a canopy over the top of those tables if the building owner agrees to it. I don't think that application has been filed formally with Mr. Aller and with the city, but we have been inquired as to what would be required to do it. Building owner has to apply for it, not the tenant. We are working, I need Mr. Aller to speak before I say things that he doesn't agree with, but perhaps there is a way for the city staff to close that street before they go home Friday afternoon with barricades, and then those barricades be taken down Sunday morning by the business owners and the space cleaned. Mr. Aller, you better talk because I'm just going to keep talking.
From a safety service standpoint, I think the best option is for the street to be open. Streets are the intention of streets is to move traffic and to allow people to get from point A to point B. And that particular street, Maplewood, I think I addressed this at the beginning of this closure. That sees, I think it's upwards of 1,800 vehicles a day, or did see upwards of 1,800 vehicles a day. Those 1,800 people for the last 30 days have had to find a different route to get to and from wherever they go. So, from a safety and service standpoint, the best option is for the street to be open. Can it be handled on a part-time basis, Friday to Saturday? Our crews would basically set the closure up on Friday afternoon before they left, and then presumably pick the barricades up on Monday morning and return. Is it logistically possible? Yes. I think some of the business concerns that you have, though, on the current section, you're going to have the same thing on the opposite section. You've got the credit union and the law office there that's never going to have the same concerns. So, I don't know. I think the purpose, the mayor kind of addressed it, the intent of doing this is when they weren't able to have the indoor seating, and all they had could be exterior seating. They now have that ability. So the need has changed. And I think it would be my preference that we get back to allowing streets to be streets and get away from closures.
Thank you. Further input, Mrs. Capolini.
So it's a long-term thought. In one of Mr. Calvary's emails, he said he felt like we set him up to fail somehow. And I almost feel like maybe we did by, I mean, that I feel like the second floor of those buildings should be zoned for business or office. And maybe it was in this, like when he redid that building, we should have encouraged him to put in offices or share. I mean, I know the Stansleys have had really good success at the top with Chandler's and the top floor above Beautiful Blooms and Fuller Art House and the building next to the parking lot. And we just forwarded something to Planning Commission for workspace. I feel like the second floor of all of those buildings should really be zoned for, I guess we're calling it PRO or office. Because as our downtown grows and we get more restaurants and more bars, which is what we're hoping for, especially with 200 more people moving in, we're going to have more of these problems that we really maybe need to look at a zoning change for our 2 blocks.
I'm not sure how you zone for the second floor. It's already zoned B3 or B4. It's B3. But B3 allows the residential usage in there. I don't think you can mandate that it can't be used for residential. It could be encouraged not to be used for residential,
Right.
but it's not a zoning change per se.
I do think it would be interesting to see what environmental design would say about that thought process, because certainly they've encouraged mixed use and living arrangements in the downtown area. So I think that would probably be part of
That's
that
true.
expansion at this point.
They were encouraging third level
But just
residences.
those
That's
2
right.
blocks. Yeah. I mean, it just makes sense because we're going to run into more and more of these problems as we continue to expand. And then a second thing that I would hope that, Bill, you could encourage Mr. Calvary to join the DSA and have a voice, because I really feel strongly that if he would have been part of the DSA and part of this decision to start with, we might not have made the same decision. But we were very transparent with our organization that manages our downtown. So, I mean, I'm afraid that our next decision, which he's chosen not to be a part of, might be worse. But
Mr. Mayor, I had a couple thoughts. I think the one thought of there not being a need for it anymore, I'm not sure that that's the case. I don't have any numbers or stats, but anecdotally, I mean, I've been out there I'm, fortunate to live around the corner, and I've frequented it quite a bit over the past 30 days. And many times I've seen both J&Gs and Inside the 5 full on the inside, every table full, upstairs full, and the outside, every picnic table full, and all the tables full around J&Gs and the park. And it almost feels, and the parklets in the past couple of weeks, I've seen those full. And it almost feels to me like there's a need for more of these kinds of outdoor spaces. And I, at least it would make me feel comfortable if we had some sort of a public hearing type meeting. I know we've heard from a couple people who have had issues. I know I've talked to people that live or work in the vicinity who love it, the closure, and I think that we should maybe have some kind of a public hearing to hear all points of view before a decision is made what to do with it.
I don't think that we had made a commitment to a permanent closing. In fact, I thought we were in another position on that discussion.
The original motion, and correct me if I'm wrong, I believe was said to close Maplewood until council said otherwise.
Right, and I think I challenged that, but the council felt comfortable to do that till a later point in time. But
Yeah.
I don't think there was a final decision, certainly for permanent closure of that space. Not that we need a big discussion about that.
Yeah, of course. I'm not saying it's permanent. The mayor mentioned opening up on Friday in a week, and I would like to get more input. That's my thought.
I do think that we were in a position prior to this where we were able to maintain a healthy flow in our downtown area, and people were comfortable with the DORA format last year. It was the COVID crisis that changed what happened and changed our need. And I think we need to remain focused on why we did that. It was a temporary fix based on a temporary situation. I do think some of those issues have been resolved at this point in time. Perhaps I can't speak to if they've been completely resolved, but we've certainly identified some new areas that do allow for additional outside community seating with the parklets, with the park, and with what we're going to be doing with the expanded DORA area. And I think that certainly community input is always valued. Community members are always welcome at our council meetings to provide input. But I do think that we want to be very cautious in the next steps here and where we go with leaving that road closed or closing the east side as well. I was actually an advocate of closing the east side the last time that we had this discussion, and the messaging then was it couldn't be considered because of the credit union and I forget the other business there. So it was quickly dismissed. So I find it interesting that now it's become kind of a key point of discussion. So I really encourage council to move cautiously as we think about these next steps. I don't know that we help ourselves by opening up another location. It just presents the possibility for other problems. And our job is to have our community downtown road open. I really feel uncomfortable every time I go down Main Street and I see our middle lane blocked off by cones and a big sign. It doesn't look attractive and it doesn't look comfortable. It looks very unwelcoming.
It is a great success for a certain group of people and businesses downtown. And it was probably strengthened by the riots in downtown Toledo and sent some of those people out here. But it is not appreciated by some of the neighbors, and it's a difficult process to reverse. Mr. Sanford, you've been wanting to say something.
Hey, Mayor, excuse me, I'd just like to add a couple of things that remember was the administration, or I brought the recommendation to close the street. And again, it was after that discussion, what should we do and what could we do differently for our downtown in this point in time. The consistent thing that I've heard, and I've talked to not only Dan Caverly that owns this building, but to other people was, and because everything happened so fast, we didn't solicit input from neighbors or anyone, was at first it was, people were surprised that it was closed. They were used to the temporary closures for festivals and events and things. And that's what I think is, I agree with Kevin that could be a way to maybe come to a compromise to going forward to work with it. So I don't think we anticipated what the response was going to be during the pandemic with the need of people to get out and to go places in the street then. And it has been a success for people. And I've talked to Patrick a lot about times that he's been there, and it's great it's being used, but then you hear the other side of what's happening in the community. So I think there's and I agree, Katie, that I think I'm going to encourage Dan to get more involved. His point was, I think he was very supportive of everything go along, and this kind of just put them over the edge, kind of thing. That's why they came to complain at this point in time. I think going forward, he's going to be, more involved in the downtown.
And maybe even whatever strategies the Stanleys are using to find those second floor office use tenants. Was there something you could?
I'll disagree with you on that, because you're talking about mixed use development. Mixed use could be office, it could be housing. Housing can be very successful on the second floor.
I'm thinking about the yoga studio.
I'm sorry?
Thinking about the yoga studio, the old yoga studio that's empty that he's complaining that he can't rent.
That could be probably more of an office, I think.
Yeah, maybe right. There's something we can help him with to find a tenant.
I think he'll be successful finding as things start picking back up, because there is, I think, demand from some of the places downtown. But again, and I think people choose to live down there. Patrick's told me he knows guys that people that live in some of these places, they want to be there. We want to always have that opportunity, but I think this was something we didn't know how this was going to go. And I think it was a great response. We tried something, we turned it around in a quick time, but there's been some bumps, and I think we got to respond to that. This is a person that the investment he made in that building is unbelievable. If anybody knew how bad shape that building was, I mean, it's great that somebody like him got involved and made the investment. I just think we have to listen.
Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Fry.
I read the concerns, and I recognize the use of the space, but I think you summarized it well in the beginning of the conversation. That circumstances have changed. Situation has changed. It was meant to be temporary. We moved incredibly fast on this, like warp speed for government in the movement of this to address the concern for a short period of time. Those circumstances have changed, and I know that I'm sure inside the 5 and J&Gs loves this because it gives them extra seating capacity and they make more money. But to Mr. Aller's point, that's not what the street is for. If we're going to have a broader conversation about what we're going to utilize the streets for, and that at that level, then we need to have a broader conversation, and it needs to take time. It isn't next month. It is a series of long-term plans that we would have to lay in place with the downtown conversations that we've been having. And I think we've met and tried to help those businesses on a short-term basis. And I think we have, but we've also heard from our residents, and I think it's time to step back from that with all the other things that have occurred, with the new seating from J&G's, with the potential of the corner park, with the parklets being installed. There are other opportunities that have shifted along with the ability of these places to open up and have people inside. To me, those are material changes. You pointed them out, and I think you're absolutely right.
Mr. McCann.
I'd like to concur with Mr. Fry and others that I think, and to your remarks, but I think even sooner would be better, meaning this Friday or this Sunday, having action to open up the street by that time.
I would recommend the action be taken on a Sunday night or a Monday morning to take it down. And I would like the administration, Mr. Aller, Chief Snore, and Mr. Sanford to have a chance to think about the changes. I want Mr. Sanford to talk to inside the 5 and J&G. He's been in conversation a lot with Mr. Cleverly. Those have not been pleasant discussions. And we will make a decision in the next, either this week or next, what action we can take. But I'd like to have the business owners have a chance to react as well. Yes, we move fast, but they need to have a chance to regroup as well.
Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Hanum.
Yes, thank you. I have I've heard the comments this evening, and I read our email, and I don't mean to diminish those in any way, but I will say that I have had many more in the 2025 range of comments endorsing our use of this section of Maplewood for this purpose. I'm not there at I'm not there at 11 or 12 o'clock at night, so I can't speak to that. I have, and honestly, the only reasons I have been there at all was simply to observe it. I'm not spending a lot of time in bars and restaurants right now. But I understand the concerns, but I think there is, the opening up the mini park is still some time off. I would, I know we went fast on this to open it up because of Memorial Day. I hate to see us close it before the 4th of July, but if that's what we're going to do, I'm sure we'll all get over it. I would hope that we would consult with the same downtown businesses that we consulted with when we opened this up before we close it, and get their input as well going forward. I guess ultimately, if I understand correctly, this is your decision, Mr. Mayor. I would concur with Patrick that I would like to have a little more input on this, but this isn't our decision. So
I appreciate your comments. I'm not ready to make a decision on this yet. I need input We will send out staff members to talk to the downtown businesses. I saw the survey that was done by DSA. There were people that wanted to close Main Street. There were people that wanted to just close Maplewood, which was the administration's position. There were people that wanted to close both, and people wanted to close none. We'll take a look at that again. And we will let everybody know what the status is ahead of time before we take that action.
Mr. Mayor.
Ms. Dow.
Mr. Fry sort of inspired me for a thought of, while we are looking at potential expansion of DOOR in the longer run, whether it's to the park south of Monroe Street or to the historical village or otherwise, would it be fitting to include looking at streets not as an ongoing closure, but as some sort of regularly known temporary closure during summer months or something, and trying to incorporate that into that larger long-term plan?
I think I like that idea. Toledo's seeming to have some success on that. And maybe it's because they have a special improvement district that pays the expenses, or they have business owners that take the responsibility of safely setting up the closures and taking them down. We have very heavy picnic tables in there that are not easy to move around. That was for sanitation purposes. They're the plastic picnic tables that are quite heavy. We're going to look at moving those, or at least some of those, into the mini park if we can maintain proper physical distancing there. We don't have the total picture yet, but I like the idea of temporary closures. We already do it for festivals and events downtown. Maybe we can schedule it for Friday and Saturday nights, but I don't think it should go into midnight. Bill, what time does Inside the Five and J&G's close?
Inside, I believe, stops serving at 10.
How late does the noise go in your neighborhood?
That's for that on the weekends. It's later, 11 o'clock.
How late is the noise?
This right goes well past the time I go to bed and turn on 2 fans so that I can go to sleep without hearing it. I would just like to add in that Maplewood area. I think it's nice to assume that those restaurants are feeding those people. However, they make it very clear we're not serving this area. Inside the Five says we are not serving it here. So people are bringing their own food and beverages. So what are we looking to provide? Help for our businesses?
Wait a minute. They're bringing their own beverages.
Oh, yes, sir. Yes, there are.
That's not legal, is it? Alcoholic. I assume you mean alcoholic beverages.
I'm assuming that's what's in their Yetis. Yes. I can't prove that, but again, we are not having police patrols, so we're not looking at open containers.
Well, we're going to have to take a look at that. It's a difficult time to have police patrols. We're trying to avoid confrontation. Police officers don't want to catch COVID-19 either.
There's also little social distancing in there.
Yeah, I can say that I ride my bike. I've been up many evenings I'm up there. I'm riding my bike, so that's not after dark. Weeknight evenings, I'll see 2 or 3 tables busy. On Friday and Saturday evenings, I see a lot more. It was interesting to see that space during the peace protests or the protest march that went through there. People at the tables were having a great time watching the entertainment go by. I almost got knocked off of my bike that night by Mrs. Capolini as she pushed by me. She was so excited about it. I turned to your husband and he said, he just shrugged like Chief.
If I may, just again, to expand on your point about the COVID-19, that is an issue. That was one of the things that we had heard complaints about, was the social distancing down there. Typically, we don't react unless we're notified by the health department. But the issue of people bringing in outside alcohol, if they're in the mini park or not, those are all code violations that at some point, if somebody complains, we're going to have to enforce. And when you go into an area where people are drinking and you try to enforce violations like that, it causes conflicts. I don't know that, and I've gotten complaints from some of the other businesses, because I was in one of the stores today, about the deliveries. When they make their deliveries, the trucks usually turn right on Maplewood. Now they're having to drive through residential areas with their with their trucks, that's another issue. It does impact more than just that corner. And, you know, it concerns me, bothers me that residents will be negatively impacted. You know, we do serve the residents and businesses, but people that live here get a little bit more of our ear because they're here 24/7. So some of those concerns do reach me, and you know, for whatever it's worth, whatever we can do to try to keep quality of life for everyone and not negative situations that my officers might have to intervene on, you know, would be in the best interest of us, for the residents and for the
Police are trying to de-escalate, not escalate situations.
Right. So if there's ways we can make both happen, both, you know, serve the interests of the businesses that are there, both businesses, because I hear it from both sides, and also reduce crime, status offenses, and the possibility for conflicts between patrons or patrons and residents and patrons and police officers. You know, that's where, you know, we'd like to land on that in some way, shape, or form. So as the days go on, I hear a few more comments, a few more complaints. I've also heard people that are very happy with it. And I saw it, I've seen it operate myself. It's just managing it can be tricky, and whatever we can do to try to, you know, uphold the rights of the businesses, the residents, and reduce conflict, we appreciate it.
All right. Thank you for your comments.
Mr. Mayor.
Mr. McCann.
Serving hours are 11 p.m. Monday through Thursday until 12 Friday and Saturday inside
12 midnight.
Yeah.
Okay.
There is an establishment that serves until 2 a.m. the door though.
Sodbuster?
You can walk down to which, you know, it has been used.
That's beyond the hours of the door, though, I believe.
Dora, yes, you're right. Yes, you're right.
So they should not be selling Dora cups. That should be alcohol served on premises.
Correct.
All right. Well, I appreciate everybody's input. I welcome more input from you as the administration studies this over the next week or two to make a decision. It will not be an easy one. The toughest decisions are always the ones that you can't make everybody happy. It'll come down on the side of safety, though, more than likely anything else. So I'm done with that. However, Lindsay, the clerk tells me that you need to actually set that building and grounds meeting during the council meeting. You did it during your committee meeting, but you really need to set it here.
I move to set a meeting for the Buildings and Grounds Committee on July 16th at 8 a.m. in council chambers.
Second.
Been moved and seconded to schedule a building and grounds committee for Thursday, July 16th at 8 a.m. in these council chambers. For the discussion of the DORA expansion.
Yes.
Possible DORA expansions. All in favor of setting that meeting indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The clerk is ordered to post that committee meeting.
Thank you.
All right. We've talked a lot about that. I think it's time to move on to our last agenda item, which was committee referrals. Mrs. Westfall added a possible discussion of the charter change or setting a committee of the whole meeting to do that.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, I'd like to schedule a committee of the whole meeting to discuss the charter amendment for elections. This has been something we've discussed a couple of times. However, I'd like to share with you that we really do need to make any final decisions and pass any legislation at our July meeting. So it seems to make the most sense that we gather together prior to that. We did ask the law director to also look at the charter, and she has some other recommendations that she may make that we will want to consider. Perhaps
Other updates in the charter to update some things. That's what that reference was.
Yeah. And Mrs. Bryan, you might share with the group, just to refresh everyone's memory, what's involved with approving this so that it can get to the ballot, and that this is a ballot issue.
Correct. This will be included as a question on the ballot in November. Council just needs to pass a resolution placing the questions on the ball. We do that the July 20th council meeting. That'll be plenty of time before the August 5th deadline, I believe, is what the county has. And that'll actually be a good time because if there's any issues, we can get them corrected prior to the August 5th date.
Thank you. So I'm hoping to set a meeting for either Tuesday, June 23rd, or Wednesday, June 24th at 8 in the morning.
Wednesday would work better.
It's Tuesday, 7:30. So would Wednesday work for you? Wednesday.
I can do Tuesday. I would have to be out of here by 8:50.
What time was it on Wednesday?
8 a.m.
What, did you say June or July?
June. Mr. McCann?
Wednesday.
Wednesday. Mr. Hanum?
You're talking about Wednesday, the 24th at 8?
June 24th at 8 a.m. in council chambers.
Yeah, that'll work for me.
Okay. Mrs. Brining? Yep, that would see. Okay, so I move that we have a committee of the whole meeting to consider charter amendment changes for elections on Wednesday, June 24th at 8 a.m. here in council chambers.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries, and we'll have the clerk post that committee meeting date as well. Thank you, Mrs. Westfall. Any additional business for the consideration of council this evening?
Mr. Mayor, I just will share with council that I understand Maumee Council this evening rejected the addition of Lucas County as a charter community.
Well, they might still have time for reconsideration. If this council's not aware, they did have a TIF, a tax incremental financing zone that would have cost their community money. I think Charter was offering to make them whole over that. I'm not sure. I'm not sure what their reasoning is. I'll read all about it in the media, I'm sure. Thank you for that update. Any other items for consideration of council at this time? There are 3 information items that you can refer to. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Been moved and seconded to adjourn. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries, and this council stands adjourned until its next regularly scheduled meeting 5 weeks from tonight on Monday, July 20th at 7:30 p.m.